The council chamber felt like it was holding its breath as the silver moonlight settled, no longer flickering, but choosing a side. My fated mate, Alpha Kale, knelt before me, his hands braced against the stone as the last of his certainty fractured. He thought strength meant choosing the pack over the bond, and he thought rejecting me would stop the storm. He was wrong. I stood at the center of the ancient runes, power no longer roaring inside me like a wound, but flowing with the weight of a sovereign. The moon law had been invoked, a trial not of combat, but of will, and I had not just survived, I had been reborn. As the mark of sovereignty bloomed at my wrist, Alpha Varix stepped from the shadows. The man no one dared challenge did not look at me with the pity of a packmate or the hunger of a conqueror. He stood apart, a fixed point of absolute authority, offering me a hand not to bind me, but to align our destinies. The elders lowered their heads, and a unified howl rose from the pack, not for a Luna, but for something Blackridge had never seen. I was no longer an Omega to be caged or a mistake to be hidden. I was the variable that would rewrite their laws, and with Varix at my side, the world would never be ordered the same again. If you've ever been replaced without explanation, left to bleed in silence while the world celebrated your loss, stay with this story. This is not the story of the bride. It's the story of the one fate refused to discard. If this moment speaks to you, comment so I know you felt it too, and subscribe to walk with her through what comes next. In the packs of the Northern Range, mate bonds were not suggestions. They were law. Chosen by the moon, reinforced by bloodlines, and honored above politics, at least that was the myth the elders told to keep order intact. In truth, power had a way of rewriting even sacred things, bending destiny to suit ambition. She had known Alpha Ren since childhood, trained beside him, bled beside him, felt the bond awaken years ago in quiet, aching pulses neither of them dared name aloud. He had promised patience, promised timing, promised that when he claimed a Luna, it would be her. Instead, he chose another, a stronger alliance, a cleaner lineage, a Luna the council approved. The ceremony was flawless. The hall rang with approval. The pack rejoiced at a union that promised prosperity and peace. Only one thing went wrong. The bond did not break. Rejected mates were supposed to fade, left with scars, yes, but free to heal. This was different. The silence that followed the vows was not release, it was containment. As if something vast had folded inward, waiting. As she slipped away from the hall, chest burning and wolf silent, she felt it, the subtle pressure of attention not meant for her. Beyond council law, beyond pack borders, the Dark Alpha ruled no territory officially acknowledged, commanded no pack that bent to council decree. Stories painted him as ruthless, shadow-bound, a sovereign who answered only to ancient moon law older than the hierarchies wolves pretended were eternal. They said he never interfered. They were wrong. Because as her mate crowned another Luna, the Dark Alpha made a decision of his own. She had always been his. And the world was about to remember that destiny did not belong to councils or kings, but to those powerful enough to claim its truth. The celebration bled into the night long after she left the great hall. Laughter echoed through stone corridors. Music followed her down the steps like an insult, bright and unrelenting. Every note pressed against the raw, aching space in her chest where the bond had gone quiet, too quiet, like a wound that refused to bleed. She did not run. Running would have meant panic, and panic would have meant weakness. Instead, she walked with measured steps through the outer courtyard, head high, shoulders squared, as if she were simply another guest, excusing herself early from a feast. The truth was far less dignified. Her wolf had retreated the moment the vows were sealed. Not wounded, withdrawn. It curled deep inside her, silent and watchful, offering no comfort, no fury, no howl of protest. That frightened her more than pain would have. Rejected mates cried, they shattered, they healed. This felt like none of those things. She reached the far gate before her breath finally faltered. Her fingers curled into the stone railing as heat surged through her chest, sharp enough to steal the air from her lungs. The bond shifted, not snapping, not tearing free, but pulling inward, compressing as if something vast were being folded away. "Stop," she whispered, though she didn't know who she was speaking to. The moon, fate, herself. The pressure eased, but it did not disappear. Behind her, the hall doors burst open. A wave of sound spilled into the courtyard, followed by voices raised in celebration. "Luna Celine!" someone called. "To the new Luna!" The words struck like blows. She straightened, forcing her breathing to steady. The scent of fresh markings, blood and power and claimed destiny, carried on the night air. Her stomach turned as the bond reacted again, a dull throb answering something that should no longer exist. Her mate was bound to another, and yet her body had not been released. Pack law said this should not be possible. She turned away from the gate and followed the outer path instead, moving into the darker stretches of the territory, where torchlight thinned and stone gave way to shadowed forest. This path had always been her refuge, a place to think, to breathe, to exist without being seen. Tonight, it felt different. The air thickened, not with dominance, with attention. She slowed, instincts flaring at last. Her wolf stirred, lifting its head slightly, ears pricked, not alarmed, not submissive, but alert in a way she had never felt before. Someone was there. She stopped completely. From between the ancient pines, a figure stepped forward, as if the darkness itself had decided to take shape. He did not rush. He did not hide. He simply emerged, presence settling into the space like something inevitable. The Dark Alpha. She knew him without needing confirmation. Every wolf did, not by sight, but by the way the world reacted around him. How the forest quieted, how the night seemed to lean inward rather than press down. His eyes were black, not empty, but deep, reflecting nothing, as if they absorbed light rather than returned it. He wore no ceremonial markings, no visible sigil of rank. Power radiated from him anyway, contained so tightly it felt colder for it. She should have bowed. She did not move. "You shouldn't be here," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. His gaze flicked briefly toward the distant hall, where music still throbbed against the night. When he spoke, his voice was low, even, threaded with something ancient and restrained. "Neither should you." Her jaw tightened. "My presence wasn't required." "No," he agreed. "It was dismissed." The word landed with precision, not cruelty, but it still cut. She folded her arms across her chest, grounding herself in the familiar weight of her own body. "If you came to offer pity, don't." A corner of his mouth curved, not a smile, but an acknowledgement of her refusal. I don't offer pity. Then what do you want? She asked. His gaze sharpened, not with hunger, not with dominance, but with recognition. To see if the bond lied, he said. Her breath caught. You felt it. Yes. The admission sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. It's over, she said quickly. He chose another. The dark alpha took one step closer. The air shifted. Your mate made a political decision, he said calmly. The moon did not agree. Her heart hammered painfully. That doesn't matter anymore. It does, he said, voice dropping. Because bonds that are silenced instead of severed do not disappear. Her wolf stirred sharply, something like warning flickering through her senses. What happens to them? She asked, despite herself. His eyes held hers, unwavering. They wait. Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. The forest seemed to hold its breath. She swallowed. You shouldn't involve yourself in pack matters. I don't, he replied. I involve myself in truth. She laughed softly, bitter and tired. Then you'll find plenty of lies back there. He did not look away. I already did. The bond pulsed once, deep, resonant, unmistakable. Her knees weakened. The dark alpha extended his hand, not to touch her, not to claim, but to steady the moment before it could fracture her completely. You were never meant to be replaced, he said quietly, and you were never his to discard. The night closed in around them, heavy with possibility and danger. Far behind her, the pack celebrated a union built on convenience. And ahead of her stood the one alpha who did not accept convenient truths. She did not take his hand. Not because she feared him, but because touching him felt like crossing a line she could not yet name. The dark alpha lowered his hand without offense, watching her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of every breath she drew. The forest around them seemed altered by his presence, shadows deeper, the night air sharper, as if reality itself had adjusted its posture. You shouldn't be here, she said again, more firmly this time. If the council senses you, they already have, he replied. They just don't yet understand what they're feeling. That sent a chill through her. Then you're risking war. A faint smile touched his lips. They would have to admit they feared me first. She exhaled slowly, forcing her pulse to settle. What do you want from me? He studied her for a long moment, gaze moving not possessively, but precisely, as if reading something written beneath her skin. I want to know why your bond went silent instead of breaking, he said. Because bonds do not do that unless they are being held. Her stomach dropped. Held by what? By another claim, he said evenly. One older than the pack's permission. The words echoed in her chest, unsettling and unwelcome. That's not possible. You felt it, he countered. The compression, the containment, that is not rejection, that is postponement. Her wolf stirred again, restless now, pacing inside her like something confined too long. Stop, she said sharply. You're filling my head with stories. His gaze sharpened. No, I'm naming what the moon already decided. She turned away from him, staring into the dark canopy overhead where moonlight filtered through the branches in fractured silver patterns. Her breath came faster than she liked. I loved him, she said quietly. Whether the bond was convenient or not. That has to mean something. It does, the Dark Alpha said. It means your loyalty is not shallow. She almost laughed at that. And his? He chose survival, he replied. You chose truth. The difference settled uncomfortably between them. She hugged herself, suddenly cold. If you're right, if something else is holding the bond, what happens now? Now? He said. Now the pressure will increase. She stiffened. Pressure from whom? From the bond itself, he answered. From the moon. And from your mate. Once he realizes the silence isn't peace. Her chest tightened painfully at the thought of Alpha Wren's confusion turning into anger. He'll come looking. Yes, the Dark Alpha said, and the council will follow. Then I need to leave, she said immediately, before this turns into something worse. The Dark Alpha shook his head. Running won't protect you. It will only confirm their fear. She turned back to him sharply. Then, what do you suggest? His gaze did not waver. That you stay exactly where you are. Her laugh was short and incredulous. In the middle of a pack that just watched me get replaced? In the middle of a reckoning, he corrected. She searched his face for mockery, for manipulation, for hunger masked as concern. She found none. Only certainty, and something like restraint. You speak as if you have a stake in this, she said. I do, he replied simply. Her heart skipped. Because of the bond? No, he said. Because of you. The admission hit harder than she expected. Before she could respond, the air shifted sharply. Scent flooded the path. Dominance layered with agitation, unmistakable and familiar. Her mate, Alpha Wren, burst through the trees moments later, ceremonial cloak discarded, eyes blazing. He took in the scene in a single glance. Her, the Dark Alpha, the space between them charged and unreadable. What is this? Wren demanded, fury and confusion warring in his expression. What are you doing here, with him? She straightened instinctively, spine rigid. I'm breathing. Wren's gaze snapped to the Dark Alpha. You have no right to interfere. The Dark Alpha inclined his head slightly. Interference implies ownership. You relinquished that. Wren growled, dominance flaring uncontrolled. The forest trembled in response. Her wolf surged to the surface at last, not in submission to Wren's power, but in defense of herself. The bond pulsed painfully, then steadied, no longer answering Wren's anger. He froze. What did you do? Wren demanded, shock cracking through his fury as he felt the shift. She met his gaze, heart pounding. I didn't do anything, she said. I stopped pretending. The silence that followed was brittle and dangerous. The Dark Alpha stepped forward, not aggressively, but decisively, placing himself just enough between them to draw a line Wren could feel even if he didn't want to acknowledge it. This conversation is not finished, the Dark Alpha said calmly. But it will continue on different terms. Wren stared at him, then at her, disbelief etched into every line of his face. You belong to the pack, he said. You always have. The Dark Alpha's voice dropped, carrying weight. The forest itself seemed to respect. She belongs to herself. The bond thrummed, deep, resonant, unresolved, and for the first time since the vows were spoken, Ren looked afraid. Ren's fear lasted only a heartbeat. Pride followed swiftly, hardening his posture, tightening his jaw as dominance surged outward in an instinctive attempt to reassert control. The forest reacted at once, branches creaking, shadows recoiling, as if unsure which authority to answer. "You don't get to decide that," Ren snarled. "Not you." His gaze locked onto the Dark Alpha, measuring, calculating, seeking weakness. The Dark Alpha did not rise to the provocation. He simply stood there, presence contained but absolute, like a mountain that did not bother to acknowledge the storm at its base. "You already decided," he replied calmly. "You just don't like the consequences." Ren turned back to her, eyes searching her face with something like desperation beneath the anger. "You felt it," he said. "You felt the bond break. Tell me you didn't." She swallowed, the memory sharp and unwelcome. "I felt it go silent." "That's the same thing," he insisted. "No," she said quietly. "It isn't." The difference mattered more than he wanted to admit. Ren took a step toward her. "Come back to the hall," he ordered. "We'll explain this. The council will—" "Will what?" she interrupted, voice steadier than she felt. "Apologize for replacing me?" "Pretend this never happened." His expression flickered. "You're being unreasonable." A bitter laugh escaped her. "You married another woman." "For the pack," he snapped. "For stability." "And what was I?" she asked. "Collateral?" Silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. The Dark Alpha watched closely, saying nothing, allowing the moment to unfold without interference. His restraint felt deliberate, an acknowledgement that this confrontation belonged to her. Ren's gaze dropped, then lifted again, resolve hardening. "You were never meant to be Luna," he said. "You don't have the bloodline. You don't have the backing. You were convenient." The words struck like a slap. Her wolf growled low, a sound that vibrated through her chest and into the night air. Power stirred in response, not explosive, not uncontrolled, but sharp, with clarity. "You never asked what I was meant to be," she said. "You decided." Ren's lips curled. "And you think he won't do the same?" The Dark Alpha's eyes flicked to Ren at last, dark and intent. "I don't decide for her," he said. "I listen." That difference, small, precise, landed with more force than dominance ever could. Ren laughed harshly. "You think listening makes you noble? You're circling her like a vulture." The Dark Alpha took one measured step forward. The air thickened instantly. "This is your final warning," he said evenly. "Lower your dominance. You are not her alpha." Ren's eyes widened as the weight of that truth pressed in on him from all sides. The unresponsive bond, the forest's hesitation, the quiet certainty radiating from the alpha before him. Still, pride reared its head one last time. "She is mine," Ren growled. The bond reacted violently, not by pulling toward him, but by rejecting the claim outright. Pain lanced through her chest, brief but decisive, followed by a sudden, startling sense of relief. Ren gasped, staggering back a step. What did you do?" he demanded, shock finally breaking through his control. She pressed a hand to her chest, breath shaky but steadying. "I let it choose." The dark alpha turned to her then, voice low and grounding. You don't have to stay. She met his gaze, heart pounding. If I leave, they'll call it abduction, treason. They'll call it whatever keeps them comfortable, he replied. Truth rarely is. Ren recovered enough to snarl. If you cross that boundary with him, you make yourself an enemy of the pack. She looked at him, really looked, and felt something inside her finally loosen. I was already your enemy, she said softly, the moment I became inconvenient. The dark alpha extended his hand again, not urgent, not demanding. An option, a choice. She hesitated only a second before stepping past Ren, placing her hand in the dark alpha's. The contact sent a controlled surge through her, warm, steady, anchoring without overwhelming. Ren stared, disbelief etched into his features. You'll regret this, he warned. She paused, turning back one last time. I regret trusting you, she said. Not choosing myself. The dark alpha led her deeper into the forest, the path opening as if it had been waiting for them. Behind them, Ren stood alone beneath the moon, bond fractured and pride wounded beyond easy repair. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and a truth the pack could no longer ignore. The forest changed as soon as they crossed the old boundary stones. She felt it under her feet first, the ground firmer, the air heavier, charged with something that did not bend to pack borders or council decrees. The dark alpha released her hand once they were beyond sight of the northern range territory, not because the connection had weakened, but because it no longer needed anchoring. Her wolf lifted its head fully now, not afraid, not submissive, aware. Where are we going? She asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for nearly a mile. To neutral ground, the dark alpha replied. A place that still answers to moon law. She glanced back once, toward the faint glow of torchlight in the distance. Somewhere behind them, Alpha Ren would be calling the council together, shaping a narrative that painted her as unstable, corrupted, stolen. By morning, she said quietly, they'll say you abducted me. Yes, he agreed. And by nightfall, they'll realize you left. That distinction mattered more than she wanted to admit. They reached a clearing where the trees parted in a perfect circle, moonlight pouring down unhindered. Old stones ringed the space, carved with runes so worn they were nearly smooth, marks of a time before hierarchy, before ranked obedience. She stopped at the edge, breath catching. This place wasn't built for judgment, he said. It was built for truth. The moment she stepped into the circle, the air shifted, not violently, not dramatically, but decisively. The bond stirred again, not reaching outward, not pulling toward Ren or even the alpha beside her, but settling into a steady, low resonance. Her knees weakened. The dark alpha was at her side instantly, steadying her without crowding. Let it happen, he murmured. You're safe. Images rushed her, not overwhelming, but vivid. Ancient wolves standing shoulder to shoulder without rank, power flowing laterally, not downward. Bonds chosen openly, broken honestly. The moon watching, not ruling, but witnessing. She gasped, clutching at the sensation. This is what it used to be. Yes, he said, before fear demanded structure. She turned to him sharply. You know this place. I was raised by its law, he replied, not by councils. Her gaze searched his face. Then why hide? Why let them paint you as something dark and dangerous? A shadow crossed his expression. Not shame, but memory. Because it was easier than letting them understand. The honesty in his answer startled her. What happens now? She asked. Now, he said. They come. As if summoned by the words, the forest stirred beyond the clearing. Scent hit her senses, dozens of wolves, anxious, angry, determined. Pack members, elders, guards, Wren's people. Her pulse spiked. They followed us. Yes, the Dark Alpha said calmly. I wanted them to. She stared at him. You wanted a confrontation? I wanted a reckoning, he corrected. There's a difference. The first wolves broke into the clearing moments later, forming a loose perimeter. They froze as the runes flared faintly beneath their feet, recognition rippling through instincts older than rank. Alpha Wren emerged from between the trees last, face carved from fury and disbelief. You have no right, he snarled, eyes fixed on the Dark Alpha. This land isn't yours. It isn't yours either, the Dark Alpha replied evenly. Wren turned to her, voice sharp with accusation. Come back, now, before you make this worse. She stepped forward before fear could claim her voice. No, she said. The word echoed louder than it should have. Wren stared. You don't understand what you're standing in. I do, she replied. I'm standing where you never let me stand, with the truth. The elders pushed forward, murmuring urgently. This place is forbidden. She's destabilizing the bond. You're inviting chaos. The runes flared brighter, silencing them. The Dark Alpha raised his voice for the first time, not loud, but carrying. This ground answers to the moon, he said. Not to councils that rewrite law for convenience. Wren snarled. You're manipulating her. No, she said firmly. You're afraid I won't go back to being small. The words landed like a blow. Her chest burned as power surged, not wild, not destructive, but present. Her wolf stood tall beside her in spirit, no longer folded inward. Wren felt it. She saw it in the way his dominance faltered, the way his scent shifted from command to uncertainty. This isn't over, he said hoarsely. No, she agreed. It's just finally begun. The moonlight intensified, flooding the clearing with silver fire, and the land itself listened. The clearing pulsed with tension thick enough to taste. Moonlight poured down in steady columns, illuminating every face. Every twitch of unease rippling through the wolves who had followed Wren into forbidden ground. No one advanced. No one retreated. Instinct warred with conditioning, and for the first time, pack law did not provide an answer. Wren broke the stalemate with a sharp laugh that rang too loud, too brittle. You think standing here makes you powerful? He demanded, eyes locked on her. You're surrounded. You don't command anyone. She felt the weight of his words, and then felt them fail to settle. The bond stirred again, not aching now, not silent either, but responsive, as if listening to something deeper than voices. Her heartbeat slowed. Her breathing evened. I don't need to command, she said quietly. I only need to stand. A murmur moved through the gathered wolves. Unease, recognition, fear. One of the elders stepped forward, staff raised. This is unlawful, he said. You cannot invoke ancient ground without council sanction. The dark alpha's gaze cut to him, cold and precise. This ground predates your council. The elder stiffened. Then name yourself fully. The dark alpha did not hesitate. I am Alaric of the Umbral Vale, he said. Sovereign alpha by moon law, not by permission. The name struck the clearing like thunder. Whispers erupted instantly. Umbral Vale, shadow territory, the dark alpha. Ren's eyes widened just a fraction before fury slammed back into place. You hide behind myths, he snarled. Your land exists only because the council allows it. Alaric's expression did not change. My land exists because your predecessors failed to take it. Silence crashed down. She felt the truth of his words settle into the ground beneath her feet. History etched not in books, but in scars the pack had chosen to forget. Ren turned back to her, desperation bleeding through his anger now. Listen to me, he said. This ends if you come home. We can explain the silence in the bond. We can... Pretend it didn't matter? She finished softly. His jaw clenched. We can protect you. You had your chance, she replied. You chose protection for yourself. The words cut deeper than she intended. She saw it in the way Ren flinched, pride and regret colliding behind his eyes. The bond pulsed sharply then, not toward him, not away, but around her. A ring of pressure expanded outward, subtle but undeniable. Wolves nearest her shifted uneasily, instincts prickling, as they felt a dominance that did not demand submission, only acknowledgement. What is she doing? Someone whispered. She's not asserting, another replied, voice tight with awe. She's anchoring. Alaric stepped half a pace closer, not touching her, but aligning himself with the resonance radiating from her body. The effect was immediate. The pressure stabilized, deepened, grounded. She is choosing herself, he said, and the land recognizes that choice. The runes along the standing stones flared brighter, ancient symbols awakening as moonlight traced their worn edges. The ground vibrated faintly, as if responding to a long-forgotten call. Ren staggered back a step. No, he breathed. This isn't how bonds work. They don't work the way you were taught, Alaric replied. They work the way the moon intended. Her chest burned, not painfully, but intensely, as power surged through her veins, answering both the land and her intent. Images flickered behind her eyes. Wolves standing as equals, power shared by consent, bonds honored without hierarchy imposed by fear. She took one step forward, then another. The wolves parted instinctively, making space without being told. Ren stared, disbelief and something dangerously close to fear, finally overtaking his anger. You're tearing the pack apart. She stopped just short of him. No, she said steadily. I'm showing it where it already cracked. He shook his head. If you do this, if you stand with him, you make yourself an enemy. She held his gaze, sadness threading through her clarity. You made me one when you replaced me without truth. The bond flared once, decisive, final. Ren gasped as something inside him gave way, the last thread of control snapping loose. He dropped to one knee, claws scraping stone as his wolf forced the truth he had refused to face. Not submission, acknowledgement. The clearing fell silent. Alaric's voice carried evenly through the stillness. "This is the moment you decide," he said to the gathered wolves. "Follow fear or follow truth." No one moved. Then, slowly, a young wolf stepped forward, eyes wide but resolute, and lowered her head, not to Alaric, not even to her, but to the space between them. Others followed, one by one, not kneeling, aligning. The pack was changing. Ren looked up at her, voice raw. "What happens now?" She drew a deep breath, feeling the moon's attention settle fully upon her. "Now," she said, "you learn how to live without owning what you don't understand." Moonlight flared brighter, sealing the moment into memory and myth. The silence that followed was not empty. It listened. Moonlight pooled thickly in the clearing, silver and deliberate, washing over wolves who had never stood outside hierarchy before. No one spoke. No one moved. Instincts strained, searching for the familiar weight of command, and finding none. She felt it settle fully then. Not dominance. Authority. The kind that did not push outward, but anchored inward, drawing the world into balance rather than bending it. Her wolf stood tall beside her in spirit now, no longer guarded, no longer uncertain. It did not bare its teeth. It watched. Ren struggled to his feet, face drawn tight with effort, breath uneven. The dominance he had once wielded so easily refused to answer him now, sliding off the clearing like rain on stone. "This isn't finished," he said hoarsely. "You can't rewrite everything in one night." She met his gaze calmly. "I'm not rewriting anything. I'm remembering it." That distinction landed harder than accusation ever could. An elder stepped forward cautiously, staff trembling slightly in his grip. "If you stand outside the pack," he said, "you forfeit its protection." Alaric's presence sharpened instantly, the forest responding with a subtle shift of pressure. "She does not stand alone," he said. She turned to him then, studying his face in the moon's steady glow. "You don't get to decide that either." Something like surprise flickered through his eyes, followed by unmistakable respect. "Agreed," he said, then let her decide. All eyes returned to her. The weight of the moment pressed down, not heavy, but absolute. She felt the truth of it resonate through the land beneath her feet, through the wolves who waited for something they could not yet name. "I won't be claimed," she said clearly. "Not by you, not by him, not by tradition dressed as law." A murmur rippled through the gathered wolves. "But," she continued, voice steady, "I will not hide either. I will stand where the moon placed me, between what was and what can be." The runes along the standing stones flared in response. Ancient symbols, igniting one by one, as if in recognition. Ren's expression twisted. "You think that makes you equal to an alpha?" She shook her head slowly. "No." The ground beneath them pulsed faintly. "It makes your hierarchy incomplete." The words settled like a verdict. Ren's shoulders sagged as the truth finally carved its way through his resistance. Regret surfaced. Not performative, not loud, but real. I thought choosing the pack meant sacrificing you, he said quietly. I didn't realize the cost would be this. Her chest tightened, not with longing, but with understanding. You chose fear over trust. The moon noticed. The bond stirred faintly between them. No pain now, no ache, just memory. Then it loosened, threads unraveling cleanly at last. Ren inhaled sharply as the final echo released him, free. Alaric watched closely, saying nothing, allowing the moment to resolve without interference. His restraint was not passive, it was disciplined, deliberate, chosen. The elder cleared his throat. If sovereign alignment is recognized, he said carefully, then ancient law demands witness. The moon answered before anyone else could speak. Light intensified, narrowing into a soft column that enveloped her without heat or harm. Her breath caught as sensation flooded her senses, not overwhelming, not violent, but intimate. Truth without illusion. Images flickered through her mind, wolves standing as equals beneath red moons, councils forming to serve rather than rule, bonds honored because they were chosen, not enforced. A mark bloomed at her wrist, intricate, luminous, unlike any pack sigil. It pulsed once, then settled into her skin as if it had always belonged there. Gasps rippled through the clearing. Several elders lowered their heads instinctively, not kneeling, but acknowledging something older than rank. Ren stared, awe finally overtaking disbelief. Slowly, he bowed his head, not to her, but to the law he had never truly understood. Alaric stepped closer, stopping just short of touching her. The resonance between them surfaced again, not pulling, not demanding, aligning. You chose restraint, he said quietly. That is why the moon answered. She met his gaze, heart steady. I chose myself. Outside the clearing, wolves began to howl, not in challenge, not in submission, but in wonder, voices lifting together as instinct recalibrated around a truth they could no longer ignore. The world had shifted, and it would not return to what it had been. The howling spread beyond the clearing. It rolled through the forest in widening waves, carried from throat to throat as wolves far beyond sight lifted their heads and answered something they did not fully understand, but recognized. Not a summons, not a command, a remembering. Moonlight softened, no longer blazing, no longer testing. It rested over the clearing like a watchful presence, satisfied but attentive. As if aware that endings were also beginnings, she stood at the center of it all, the mark at her wrist warm beneath her skin. Not burning, not demanding, simply there, a truth etched into flesh rather than enforced by law. Ren remained where he was, shoulders bowed, no longer struggling against the loss of authority, but adjusting to its absence. The wolf inside him had gone quiet, not broken, but humbled. I see it now, he said at last, voice low and stripped of pretense. The bond didn't fail because you were insufficient. She waited. It failed, he continued, swallowing hard, because I tried to turn destiny into strategy. The admission carried no excuse with it, no request, just recognition. I won't pretend forgiveness comes easily, she said gently, but I won't carry your mistake as my burden anymore. Ren nodded once, sharply. Then let this be the end of it. It already is, she replied. The final echo of the bond dissolved then, not with pain, not with relief, but with clarity. What remained was memory, and memory no longer had power over her. An elder stepped forward hesitantly, eyes fixed on the standing stones now glowing faintly with residual moon lore. "What happens to the pack?" he asked. "If hierarchy no longer binds her, where does that leave us?" She looked around the clearing, at wolves who had knelt to no alpha tonight, at elders forced to confront laws older than their authority, at a system exposed not as evil, but as incomplete. "It leaves you with choice," she said, "the same one I was denied." Silence followed, not resistant, not angry, thoughtful. Alaric had not moved since the mark appeared. He stood a step away from her, presence steady, eyes dark with something deeper than hunger or triumph. When she turned to face him, the resonance between them surfaced once more, quiet, deliberate, unmistakable. "You never claimed me," she said. "No," he replied. "You could have," she added. "It would have been easy." His gaze did not waver. Easy things rarely last. She studied him then, not as a savior, not as a rival alpha, but as a sovereign who understood restraint as power. "I won't belong to anyone," she said. "I wouldn't walk beside someone who did," Alaric answered. The honesty between them felt like solid ground. She took a single step closer, not into his space, not into submission, but into alignment. The mark at her wrist pulsed softly, answering the subtle flare at his own, mirrored and deliberate. A choice made in full awareness. The moon responded, not with spectacle but with harmony. The clearing exhaled. One by one the wolves began to withdraw, not fleeing, not defeated, but changed. Conversations would come later. Conflicts would follow. Packs would fracture and reform in the weeks ahead. But something irreversible had already happened. Ren watched her as she turned away from the standing stones, his voice quiet. "Will you return?" She paused, considering the question honestly. "Yes," she said at last. "But not as what you expect." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "Then Blackridge will have to evolve." "It always did," she replied. "You just stopped listening." She walked to the edge of the clearing, feeling the forest open around her like a path long denied and finally reclaimed. Alaric fell into step beside her, not leading, not following, walking. Behind them, the moonlight dimmed to its usual glow, the standing stones settling back into silence. Ahead lay uncertain roads, contested borders, truths that would demand courage rather than obedience. She welcomed all of it, because she had not been chosen. She had chosen. Her mate married another, believing destiny could be rewritten. Yet under the moon's true law, she was never discarded at all, because the dark alpha did not claim her. He walked beside the truth she had always been.